The stars had never looked so close. Captain stood on the bridge of the Odyssey Dawn, watching the massive structure grow larger in the... It was humanity's first real step into the galaxy, and his heart pounded with excitement and fear in equal measure. The diplomatic station was enormous. It orbited a neutron star, spinning slowly in the darkness. Lights covered its surface like a city floating in space. Had seen pictures, read the reports, but nothing prepared him for the actual size of it. Thousands of ships moved around it like insects around a lamp. "We're being hailed," said from her station. She was the ship's navigator, but today she handled communications too. Her fingers moved across the console. "They're sending docking instructions." Nodded. Behind him, the rest of his small crew worked quietly. Checked the engines one more time. Reviewed his translation files. They had practiced this moment 100 times, but practice felt different from reality. The station grew closer. Could see details now. Windows and ports. Docking bays large enough to swallow their ship whole. Movement everywhere. This was the heart of the Galactic Coalition, home to thousands of species from across the stars. "Take us in," said. The Odyssey Dawn glided into the docking bay smoothly. Was an excellent pilot. The ship settled onto the landing platform with barely a tremor. Through the windows, saw figures waiting for them. Aliens. Real aliens, not just images on a screen. "Everyone ready?" asked. His crew nodded. They had trained for this. They knew the protocols, but saw the nervousness in their eyes. He felt it too. Humanity had dreamed of this moment for centuries. Now it was here. The airlock opened. Stepped out first, his crew following behind him. The air smelled different, metallic with a hint of something sweet. The gravity felt slightly wrong, just enough to notice. Walked forward, keeping his steps measured and calm. The welcoming committee waited at the end of the platform. Recognized them from the briefing files. The tall one with the blue skin was Ambassador Han of the... The shorter one covered in golden scales was Counselor of the Empire. 3 others stood with them, representing other major civilizations. "Captain," Han said. The translation device worked perfectly, making the aliens' words sound natural. "Welcome to Coalition Station. We are honored to meet humanity." Bowed slightly the way they had practiced. "The honor is ours, Ambassador. Humanity thanks you for this opportunity." The formalities continued. Greetings were exchanged. Names were spoken. Introduced his crew. The aliens seemed friendly enough, though it was hard to read expressions on such different faces. Still, their body language suggested warmth. That was good. They were led through the station. Tried not to stare, but it was impossible. Aliens walked past them in every direction. Some were humanoid, others were not. Flying creatures drifted overhead. Something that looked like a living puddle of water slid along the floor. The diversity was staggering. "The Coalition represents 5,000 species," Han explained as they walked. "We have maintained peace for over 10,000 years. War is unknown among civilized species now." "That's remarkable," said. And it was. Humanity had barely managed a century of relative peace. 10,000 years seemed impossible. They reached a large conference room. The walls were transparent, showing the stars outside. Inside, comfortable seats had been arranged around a circular table. The aliens had even provided chairs sized for humans. "Please sit," said. The scales glittered under the lights. "We have much to discuss." The meeting began. The aliens explained how the coalition worked. It was a democratic system, they said. Each species had representation. Decisions were made through careful debate and voting. Resources were shared. Knowledge was exchanged. Everyone benefited. "But there are rules," Han said. "The coalition exists to maintain peace. All members must follow certain principles." Listened carefully. The rules seemed reasonable. No territorial expansion without approval. No hoarding of resources. Disputes resolved through arbitration, never force. It all made sense. And war, asked, you said it's been abolished. Completely, confirmed. No coalition member has engaged in warfare for 10. We have evolved beyond such barbarism. Spoke up, how is that possible? Surely conflicts arise. They do, Han admitted, but we resolve them peacefully. The Coalition's Arbitration Council settles all disputes. Their decisions are final and binding. All species accept this. Something in the way Han said accept made pause, but he let it pass. This was their first meeting. There would be time to understand the details later. The discussion continued for hours. The aliens asked questions about Earth, about humanity's history, culture, and technology, answered as honestly as he could, though he left out some of the darker parts of human history. No need to emphasize humanity's violent past on the first day. Finally, Han stood. Captain, the Coalition would like to offer humanity provisional membership. However, there is a standard process all species must complete. What kind of process? Asked. A compatibility assessment, explained. It's psychological in nature. We need to ensure that new species are compatible with Coalition values. It's a formality, really. No species has failed in over 3,000 years. Glanced at his crew, gave a small nod. As the teams and cultural specialist, he was probably the best choice for such an assessment. When would this happen? Asked. Tomorrow, if convenient, Han said. It takes only a few hours. Once completed successfully, we can begin the formal membership process. Considered, it seemed reasonable. Very well, our team member will participate. The aliens seemed pleased. They stood and more formalities followed. Hands were shaken. Thanks were given. The humans were shown to their quarters, comfortable rooms with windows overlooking the stars. That night couldn't sleep. He stood at his window, watching ships come and go from the station. Everything seemed perfect. Too perfect, perhaps. The Coalition's peace was impressive, but something about it nagged at him. He thought about Han's words. All species accept this. The way it was said, as if acceptance was automatic, as if there was no other option. In the next room was probably sleeping. Tomorrow he would undergo the assessment, hoped it would go well. Humanity needed this. A place among the stars, knowledge and friendship from thousands of species, a chance to leave their violent past behind. But deep in his gut felt uncertain. The galaxy seemed wonderful. The Coalition seemed welcoming. Yet something felt wrong, like a note played slightly off-key in a beautiful song. He shook his head. He was being paranoid. Tomorrow would prove that, would pass the assessment easily. Humanity would join the Coalition. Everything would be fine. Outside, the neutron star spun silently in the darkness, and the galaxy turned, unknowing and uncaring about the small species taking its first steps into a larger world. The assessment room was smaller than expected. White walls, soft lighting, and 2 chairs facing each other. Nothing threatening, nothing uncomfortable, just a simple room where 2 beings could talk. Chief Assessor waited for him. The alien was tall and thin, with gray skin that looked like weathered stone. 4 eyes arranged in a square pattern on its face. When gestured to the empty chair, all 4 eyes moved independently. "Please sit," of humanity said. The voice was gentle, almost musical. "This will not be difficult. We are simply going to talk." Sat down. He had prepared for this. Read everything available about Coalition psychology. Practice staying calm and diplomatic. This was just a conversation, nothing to worry about. "How does this work?" asked. "I ask questions. You answer honestly. There are no wrong answers." Settled into the other chair. "The assessment measures compatibility with Coalition values. We want to understand how your species thinks." "I understand." The questions started simply. What did humans value most? How did they organize their societies? What made them happy? Answered carefully, presenting humanity in the best light possible while staying truthful. Seemed satisfied. The alien took notes on a device that floated beside the chair. Sometimes it asked follow-up questions. Sometimes it just nodded and moved on. An hour passed, then two. The questions grew more specific. How did humans handle disagreements? What happened when resources were scarce? How did they choose their leaders? Explain democracy, law, and human justice systems. He talked about how humanity had learned from its mistakes, how they had grown past their violent history, how they now valued peace and cooperation. Interesting, said. All four eyes focused on. Your species has indeed changed significantly, but let me ask you something more specific. Of course. Leaned forward. Imagine a scenario. Your world faces a threat. Another species, far more powerful than humanity, demands something from you. Perhaps they want your resources. Perhaps they want control of your government. Perhaps they simply want you to do something you find morally wrong. Yes, waited for the rest. This species has weapons that could destroy Earth. They have fleets that could blockade your system. Fighting them would be hopeless. You would lose and many humans would die. Submission would mean survival, but at a cost to your freedom or values. Paused. What would humanity do? Thought carefully. This seemed like a test of pacifism. The coalition valued peace above all else. They wanted to know if humans would choose violence. We would try diplomacy first, said. Look for a peaceful solution. Try to understand why they wanted these things. Find a compromise. But if diplomacy failed, pressed. If they refused to negotiate, if they simply demanded submission, then we would. Stopped. He wanted to say humanity would submit. That was probably the right answer, the peaceful answer, but it wasn't honest. He had promised to answer honestly. We would say no, said quietly. The room became very still. His four eyes widened, all of them. The alien's body went rigid. Say that again, said. The musical quality had left its voice. We would say no, repeated. We would refuse. Humanity has faced extinction before. We've faced impossible odds. Sometimes we found another way. Sometimes we fought and lost, but we never just accepted it without resistance. Stood up suddenly. The floating device clattered to the floor. The alien moved to a panel on the wall and pressed something. Red lights began flashing in the corridor outside. What's wrong? Asked Standing 2. Did I say something incorrect? You need to stay here, said. The alien's voice shook. Do not leave this room. Do not speak to anyone. I must consult with the High Council immediately. I don't understand. What did I? But was already gone, the door sealing behind it. Stood alone in the white room, confused and increasingly worried. Through the small window in the door, he could see aliens rushing past. The red lights kept flashing. Something was very wrong. Back in the human quarters, received an urgent call from. He found her in the ship's communications center, her face pale. Captain, something's happening, she said. The entire station went to alert status 10 minutes ago. Security forces are moving everywhere, and I've been monitoring their communication channels. They're talking about us. What are they saying? I can't understand most of it. The translation software is having trouble, but I caught some words. Contamination risk, incompatible species, emergency protocols. Looked at him. Where's? Stomach dropped. He's in the assessment. He should have been done an hour ago. Burst into the room. Captain, we have a problem. They've locked down the docking bay. Our ship is surrounded by security drones. And look at this. She pulled up a display on the screen. It showed multiple coalition warships moving into position around the station. Not attacking, just watching, waiting. This doesn't make sense, said. We haven't done anything wrong. The meeting yesterday went well. Wouldn't have said anything offensive. He's too careful. Maybe it's not about us, suggested. Maybe there's another emergency. But didn't believe that. The timing was too perfect. Something said during the assessment had triggered this response. But what? He tried to access the station's public information network. It was restricted now. Most channels were closed. but one remained open, showing official coalition broadcasts. Watched as ambassadors from various species appeared, all looking shaken. Emergency council sessions were being called. Security measures were being implemented. And in every broadcast, in every statement, one phrase kept appearing. The human question must be resolved. "They're talking about us," said. "What did tell them?" Had no answer. He tried to contact directly, but all communication to the assessment center was blocked. He tried to reach Ambassador Han. No response. Counselor, nothing. Humanity had been cut off. Hours passed. The crew stayed together, watching the displays, trying to understand what was happening. The warships remained in position. Security drones continued to surround their ship, and no one would tell them anything. Finally, near midnight station time, a message arrived. It was from Han, and it was brief. "Captain, the High Council requests your presence tomorrow at dawn. Bring your entire crew. This concerns humanity's future in the galaxy. The matter is grave. I can say no more." Read it 3 times. The words were formal, careful, almost frightened. Han, who had been so warm yesterday, now sounded distant and cold. "What do we do?" asked. "We go to the meeting," said, "and we find out what said that scared them so badly." That night none of them slept. They sat together in the common area, drinking coffee and watching the stars. The station felt different now. Not welcoming, not friendly. It felt like a cage. And somewhere in that cage, sat alone in a white room, wondering what word he had spoken that had turned the galaxy's friendly face into something else entirely. The council chamber was massive. Had seen pictures of stadiums on Earth that were smaller. Thousands of seats rose in circles around a central platform. Every seat was filled. Aliens of every shape and size watched as the human crew was led inside. Walked at the front, his crew behind him. Their footsteps echoed in the sudden silence. He could feel thousands of eyes on them. Some eyes were familiar to human biology. Others were not eyes at all, but he felt them watching anyway. At the center of the platform stood a raised dais. 7 beings sat there, representing the highest powers in the coalition. High Chancellor occupied the middle seat, a being that looked like flowing crystal given form. To the left and right sat the others, each representing thousands of years of civilization and power. "Captain of Humanity's voice filled the chamber. It sounded like wind chimes and thunder mixed together. "You stand before the full Galactic Council. This is an honor rarely given to species seeking membership." "We are grateful," said. His voice sounded small in the huge space, but the acoustics carried it clearly. "Though I confess, we do not understand why we are here." "You will understand shortly. Please join your companion." Guards led them to a section near the dais. Was already there, looking exhausted. He gave a weak nod. They weren't allowed to speak yet. Rose from the seat. The crystalline form seemed to shimmer under the lights. "Members of the council, honored representatives, we face a situation that has not occurred in 3,000 years. A species has been identified that carries a fundamental incompatibility with coalition existence." Murmurs ran through the chamber. Thousands of beings speaking at once, creating a wave of sound that washed over the humans. "That species is humanity." The murmurs became louder. Felt his hands clench into fists. Beside him's face had gone pale. Looked angry, just looked tired. "I don't understand," called out. "What incompatibility? We came in peace. We seek only friendship and membership." "We know," said. The crystalline being's form shifted colors, showing emotion couldn't read. "Your intentions are not in question. Your nature is." Gestured, and a hologram appeared in the center of the chamber. It showed in the white assessment room. It showed asking the question, and it showed's answer. "We would say no." The hologram repeated it 3 times. Each time the reaction in the chamber grew stronger. Some aliens stood up. Others made sounds of distress. A few looked angry. Most looked afraid. "I still don't understand," said. He answered a hypothetical question. What's wrong with his answer? Everything, said another council member, a being covered in what looked like living moss. Do you not see? Do you truly not understand? Explain it to us, said. She stepped forward. We're new to galactic society. We don't know your rules. Just tell us clearly what we did wrong. Was silent for a long moment. Then the Chancellor spoke, and every word felt heavy. In 10,000 years of coalition history, one word has been effectively eliminated from civilized discourse. It is a word so dangerous, so destructive to peace, that its very existence threatens everything we have built. What word? Asked, though he was beginning to understand. No, said it softly, but the sound carried to every corner of the chamber. The word is no. Silence fell, complete and total, looked around at the thousands of beings. They all stared at the humans with a mixture of fear and fascination. You cannot be serious, said. It's just a word. It means refusing something, disagreeing. How can that be dangerous? Because it represents defiance, explained. Let me tell you how the coalition maintains peace, Captain. Let me tell you the truth we do not speak loudly, but everyone knows. The hologram changed. It showed the galaxy marked with territories and borders. We have 5,000 member species. They range from newly spacefaring to ancient civilizations. Some are powerful, some are weak. Conflicts arise naturally from such diversity. You said you resolve them peacefully, said. We do through the Arbitration Council. They examine each dispute and make a ruling. Both sides accept the ruling. Peace is maintained. Paused. But why do they accept? Because it's fair, suggested. No, because they know what happens if they don't. The hologram showed coalition fleets, massive warships, weapons that could crack planets. If a species refuses the ruling, the coalition enforces it, with overwhelming force if necessary. But here is the key, Captain. Here is what keeps the peace. The crystalline being's form darkened. No species refuses, ever, because every species in this chamber has been shaped, either through evolution or cultural conditioning, to accept inevitable defeat. When faced with superior force, when presented with impossible odds, every civilized species acknowledges reality and submits. That is how peace works. That is how we prevent war. We have bred defiance out of the galaxy. Felt sick? That's not peace, that's tyranny. Call it what you wish. It has prevented war for 10. It has saved quadrillions of lives, and it works because everyone accepts it. Gestured toward the humans. Except you. Counselor stood now. The golden scales seemed dimmer than before. Your species retains the capacity for defiance, Captain. When faced with extinction, you would still say no. You would resist even when resistance is hopeless. This makes you incompatible with our peace. So what? Spoke for the first time. His voice was hoarse. So we would resist. That doesn't mean we would be aggressive. We came here seeking peace. You miss the point, said the moss-covered council member. It's not about aggression. It's about the example you set. If other species see humanity saying no, see you resisting and surviving, they might remember that they too can refuse. The entire system collapses if species stop accepting defeat. You're afraid of us, said. She sounded amazed. The whole galaxy is afraid of one small species because we still have the spine to stand up for ourselves. Afraid is the correct word, admitted. We have seen your species before. 17 times in our history, we have encountered species that retain the capacity for defiance. Would you like to know what happened to them? The hologram changed again. It showed planets, systems, civilizations, and then it showed them burning, blockaded, abandoned, destroyed. Some accepted modification, continued. We changed them genetically to be more compatible. Others chose isolation, trapped on their worlds forever. A few chose to fight. They all lost eventually, but the cost was high, very high. Looked at his crew. He saw anger in its eyes, fear in its, determination in its. They had come so far. Humanity's dream of joining the stars, and now this. The Council will deliberate on humanity's fate, said. You will be given quarters to wait in. This decision will take time. It has implications for the entire galaxy. How much time? Asked. Days, perhaps weeks. We have not faced this situation in 3,000 years. Many council members have never considered what to do with a defiant species. We must debate. We must decide. And our options? Asked. Crystalline form shifted through several colors before answering. Modification, quarantine, or elimination. Those are the only paths we have ever used. If there is a fourth option, we have not found it. The humans were led away. As they walked through the chamber, noticed something. Not all the aliens looked afraid. Some of the younger species, the ones who had joined the coalition more recently, looked different, curious, thoughtful, almost hopeful. Maybe they remembered what it was like to say no. Maybe they missed it. In their quarters that night, the crew sat together in silence for a long time. Finally spoke. They want to change us, make us into something that will just roll over when pushed. Or trap us forever, added. No stars, no exploration, just Earth alone in the dark. Or kill us all, finished. They all looked at. He was the captain. The decision would fall to him eventually. What would humanity choose? But already knew the answer. Deep down, he had always known. From the moment he heard what the galaxy wanted from them, there was only one response humanity could give. The question was whether the galaxy would accept it, worked quietly in the ship's computer core. It was late, station time, and the others were trying to sleep. She couldn't. Her mind kept circling the same problem. There had to be more to this story. The coalition had given them access to basic databases, history files, cultural information, the kind of things any visitor could see, but was an engineer. She understood systems, and every system had gaps, places where the official version didn't quite match the underlying code. She had been probing those gaps for hours. The first breakthrough came near midnight. A reference to something called the Historical Archive, mentioned in a footnote of a cultural document. But when she tried to access it, the file didn't exist. Or rather, it existed but was hidden behind multiple layers of security. That was interesting. Why hide history? Had tools for this. Humanity might be new to the galaxy, but they understood encryption and security systems. She set her programs running and went to make coffee. By morning she had access. The historical archive was vast. Thousands of years of records, debates, decisions. Most of it was boring administrative detail. But buried deep in the oldest sections, she found what she was looking for. The founding of the coalition. According to the official histories, the coalition was formed by peaceful agreement after species met and decided to work together. The truth was different, much different. There had been a war, a massive, brutal war between two ancient powers whose names had been erased from current records. They had nearly destroyed the galaxy. Whole sectors were rendered lifeless. Entire species were caught in the crossfire and eliminated. The survivors gathered after, traumatized and broken. They made a decision. War could never happen again. But how do you prevent war? How do you ensure peace across thousands of different species with different values and goals? The answer they found was simple and horrible. Remove the capacity to fight from everyone. The coalition wasn't founded on cooperation. It was founded on enforced submission. The most powerful surviving species used their military might to impose a new order. Join the coalition and accept our rules or be isolated and contained. Most species, weakened by the war, chose to join. But some didn't. Found the records of the first defiant species. They were called the. They had refused to join the coalition, refused to accept the new order. They wanted to remain independent. The coalition had given them the same three choices being offered to humanity now: modification, quarantine, elimination. They had chosen to fight. The war lasted 300 years. They were outnumbered 1,000 to 1, but they wouldn't surrender. They used guerrilla tactics, hit-and-run attacks, hiding in the dark spaces between stars. They cost the coalition dearly. In the end, numbers won. They were hunted down. Their worlds were burned. The last of them died in a battle that destroyed an entire star system. The coalition won, but barely. That war shaped everything that came after. Every policy, every law, every cultural norm was designed to prevent another situation. The coalition began carefully selecting which species could join. They studied psychology, genetics, culture. They only accepted species that showed the capacity for submission. And for species that were already members, they began programs of modification. Genetic changes to make them more peaceful, cultural conditioning to make them more accepting. Over thousands of years, the galaxy was reshaped to eliminate defiance. Found records of 16 other species after the. Each one had retained some capacity for resistance. Each one had been dealt with. Some accepted modification and became docile, integrated members. Others were quarantined. Their expansion into space halted forever. 3 more chose to fight and were destroyed. The last case was 3,000 years ago. A species called the. They had been offered the usual 3 options and had chosen isolation. They were trapped in their home system by coalition defense platforms. For 3,000 years they had lived there, looking at the stars they could never reach. Felt cold reading that. 3,000 years trapped on one world, knowing the galaxy was out there but forever forbidden to join it. That was its own kind of death. She dug deeper. There was another section of the archive, more heavily encrypted than the rest. It took her until dawn to break through. What she found made her call the others immediately. They gathered in the computer core, still in their sleep clothes, showed them what she had discovered. This is a psychological study, she explained, conducted by the Coalition Science Division 5,000 years ago. They wanted to understand what made species defiant. And asked. They found patterns. Species that evolved as prey animals tend to accept submission easily. It's built into their survival instincts. Species that evolved as predators are more variable, but if they had pack structures or hierarchies, they could be conditioned to accept leadership from the coalition. What about humans? Asked. That's the problem. We're persistence hunters. We evolved by refusing to give up, by chasing prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. We survived not by being the strongest or fastest, but by being too stubborn to quit. That trait is burned into our psychology. She pulled up another file. But there's more. Look at human history. We have documented cases going back thousands of years of humans refusing impossible odds. Battles where tiny forces held off armies. Resistances where occupied populations fought for generations. Political movements that kept pushing despite violent suppression. We're persistent, said, so what? So the coalition studied this. They determined that humanity has the highest defiance index they've ever measured, higher than any of the 17 extinct species. We're not just capable of saying no, we're psychologically built to do it. The room was silent, finally spoke. That's why they're so scared. Yes, because they know their standard approaches won't work on us. Modification would have to be so extensive it would make us something other than human. Quarantine would just make us focus all our efforts on breaking out. And elimination would require them to commit genocide on a scale that might break the coalition itself. Pulled up one final document. This is from the council deliberations after the war. One counselor raised a question. What if we encounter a species even more defiant than the? What if we face something we can't modify, can't contain, and can't destroy without destroying ourselves? What was the answer? Asked. There wasn't one. The question was tabled indefinitely. They decided to hope such a species never existed. But we do exist, said. We do, And according to these files, several council members already know that standard options won't work. They're buying time with the deliberation, trying to find a fourth option that doesn't exist. Stood and walked to the window. Outside, the station continued its business. Ships came and went. Aliens moved about their lives. The galaxy turned, massive and ancient and full of species that had forgotten how to resist. "They should have left us alone," said quietly. "We would have found other humans eventually, built our own civilization in empty space. We didn't need the coalition." "But they can't leave us alone now," said, "because we know their secret. We know their peace is just enforced submission, and if we tell other species, it could unravel everything," finished. "That's what they're really afraid of, not that we'll fight them, but that we'll inspire others to fight." Looked at the files on the screen. Centuries of history, 17 dead species, one word eliminated from the galaxy, all to maintain a peace built on the ruins of freedom. "We need to tell Earth about this," he said. "Everything. They need to know what we're facing." "Already done," said. "I sent an encrypted data burst 6 hours ago. It should reach Earth in 3 weeks." "Will it make a difference?" asked. "I don't know, but at least they'll have all the information before they have to decide." They stood together, 4 humans alone on a station full of aliens, surrounded by a galaxy that had spent 10,000 years forgetting how to fight for its freedom. Outside, a ship was leaving the station. It was a small vessel from one of the younger species. As it passed the human quarters, it sent a brief, encrypted message to the Odyssey Dawn. "Some of us remember," it said. "Some of us are waiting." And in the darkness between stars, other messages began to move. Quiet communications between species who had joined the coalition recently enough to still recall what independence felt like. They watched the humans. They waited to see what humanity would choose. The galaxy had been asleep for 10,000 years, but something was waking up. 3 weeks passed. 3 weeks of waiting while the council deliberated. 3 weeks while the galaxy watched and wondered what would happen to the species that still knew how to say no. Spent the time preparing. He read everything in the archives. He studied the 17 extinct species. He learned about and their 300-year war. He memorized the faces of every council member, learning which ones seemed sympathetic and which ones seemed afraid. Most importantly, he talked to his crew. They discussed every option, every possibility, every consequence, because when the council finally called them back would have to give an answer, and that answer would determine humanity's future. On the morning of the 22nd day, the summons came. The council was ready. They had made their decision about humanity. The chamber was fuller this time. Not just council members but observers from across the galaxy. News of the human situation had leaked, despite the coalition's efforts to keep it quiet. Everyone wanted to see how this would end. High Chancellor stood as the humans entered. The crystalline form seemed dimmer than before, as if the past weeks had exhausted it. "Captain, we have deliberated extensively. The Council has reached a conclusion regarding humanity's fate." Stood straight. His crew flanked him. They had dressed in their formal uniforms. If this was the end, they would face it with dignity. "The debate was difficult," continued. "Your species presents unique challenges. We considered modification, but our geneticists inform us that the changes required would be so extensive as to eliminate what makes you human. We considered quarantine, but our strategic analysts believe you would spend the isolation developing weapons and planning escape. And we considered elimination, but several council members raised moral objections to genocide." "So what do you offer?" asked. "A compromise. You will return to Earth. Your species will be granted provisional status, not full membership. You may develop within your own system. You may conduct limited trade with approved coalition partners. But humanity will not be permitted to expand beyond your home system. No colonies. No exploration. You will be contained but not imprisoned." "That's still quarantine," said. just with better marketing. It is the best we can offer, said. It allows your species to survive and develop while protecting the coalition's stability. Was silent for a long moment. He looked at the thousands of beings in the chamber. He saw fear in many eyes, but he also saw something else in some of the younger species. Hope, maybe. Curiosity. A desire to see what would happen if someone finally refused. "May I consult with my crew?" asked. "You may, but understand, Captain. If you reject this offer, we will be forced to consider more severe options. This is the best path for everyone." Turned to his crew. They huddled together, speaking quietly so the microphones wouldn't pick up their words. "It's not terrible," said. "We survive, Earth survives. Maybe in a few hundred years things will change." "They won't," said. "If we accept this, we validate their system. We prove that even humans will eventually submit. It makes everything they've done for 10,000 years okay." "But if we refuse, they might destroy us," argued. "All of humanity gone, is pride worth that?" "It's not about pride," said. "It's about what we are. If we accept this, we're not human anymore. Not in any way that matters." They all looked at. He took a deep breath. He thought about Earth, about humanity's long history of resistance, about every time humans had faced impossible odds and refused to back down. Sometimes they won. Sometimes they lost, but they always chose to make the choice themselves. "I know what we have to do," said. "I've known since we first heard the options. There's only one answer humanity can give." He turned back to face the council. The chamber fell silent. Thousands of beings waited to hear humanity's choice. "High Chancellor, honored council members, I thank you for your time and consideration. I understand the offer you've made, and I understand it comes from a desire to avoid worse outcomes." His voice carried clearly through the massive chamber. "However, on behalf of humanity, I must reject your offer. We reject all three options. We will not accept modification. We will not accept quarantine, no matter how it's packaged. And we will not submit to elimination without resistance." The chamber erupted, shouting in 1,000 languages, beings standing up, security forces moving forward, but kept talking, his voice rising above the chaos. "Humanity chooses to remain free. We choose to keep the right to explore, to expand, to make our own decisions about our future. We choose to keep the ability to say no when we believe something is wrong. If that makes us incompatible with your coalition, then we will not join. You understand what this means?" His voice cut through the noise like a blade. "You leave us no choice but containment or elimination. Your species will not survive this decision." "Maybe," said, "maybe we won't. Humanity has faced extinction before. We've faced wars, plagues, natural disasters. Sometimes we survived by luck, sometimes by skill. But we always faced it as ourselves, making our own choices. If we die free. That's worth more than eternal life as someone else's pet." The chamber went quiet. What had said was unthinkable. No species had ever rejected all options. No species had ever chosen potential extinction over submission. But before could respond, something unexpected happened. A representative from the back rows stood up. It was a member of a species called one of the more recent coalition members. There had only joined 200 years ago. "I have a question for the council," they said. Their voice shook slightly. "If humanity chooses independence and we do not actively support them but also do not participate in their containment or elimination, what happens to us?" His crystalline form flickered. "That would be a violation of coalition unity. All members are expected to support council decisions." "But what if we don't?" Another voice from a different section, a species didn't recognize. "What if we believe the humans have the right to exist as they are?" "This is not up for debate," Counselor said, standing. The golden scales seemed to bristle. "The council has spoken. The decision is final." "Is it?" A third voice. Then a fourth. Then dozens. Representatives from younger species, from civilizations that still remembered what freedom felt like, were standing up, not agreeing with humanity, not joining their cause, just questioning, just asking if maybe, possibly, there could be another way. The council tried to restore order, but the questions kept coming. For 10,000 years, the coalition had operated on unanimous acceptance. Everyone agreed because everyone had been shaped to agree. But now that unity was cracking. Watched as the chamber descended into debate, he had expected fear, he had expected threats, he hadn't expected this. High Chancellor called for a recess. Security forces ushered the humans back to their quarters. As they left, saw the faces of the younger species watching them. Some looked angry, some looked afraid, but some looked inspired. Back in their quarters, the crew was quiet for a long time. Finally spoke. "We might have just started something. Or ended everything," said. "They could still destroy us." "They could," agreed. "But look what happened in there." The council couldn't get consensus. For the first time in thousands of years, species are questioning whether the coalition's way is the only way. "Because of one word," said softly, "because we said no." Days passed. The council remained in session, but no decision came. The human crew monitored communications and saw that the debate had spread beyond the chamber. Across the coalition, species were discussing the human question. Most supported the council's position, but a significant minority had doubts. 600 species calculated. Out of 5,000, 600 had expressed some form of disagreement with eliminating or forcibly containing humanity. It wasn't a majority, it wasn't even close, but it was enough to prevent unanimous action. The coalition had a problem. They couldn't deal with humanity without dealing with the growing dissent in their own ranks. And they couldn't deal with the dissent without addressing the fundamental question: was their peace worth the cost? On the 30th day, summoned alone, they met in a small conference room, just the two of them. "You have created a crisis," said. There was no anger in the voice, just weariness. "The coalition has not faced this level of disagreement in." "That's not our fault," said. "We just answered honestly." "I know, that's what makes it worse. You revealed a truth we've tried to hide for 10,000 years. Our peace is built on submission, not cooperation. And now species are asking if there's a better way." "Is there?" Crystalline form shifted through several colors. "I don't know, perhaps, but finding it will take time. Years, maybe decades. Meanwhile, what do we do with you?" "Let us go home," said simply. "Don't grant us membership. Don't trade with us, just let us exist. We'll stay in our own space. We won't bother the coalition. And if your presence inspires others to resist, then maybe they should resist. Maybe a peace that requires everyone to forget how to say no isn't worth keeping." Was silent for a long time. Finally, the Chancellor spoke again. "I will propose something to the Council. It's unprecedented, but these are unprecedented times. You will be granted neither membership nor containment. You will be ignored. Officially, the coalition will have no position on humanity. Unofficially, you will be left alone. If you expand, if you explore, if you build your own civilization among the stars, we will not interfere, but we will also not help. That's all we're asking for," said. "The right to be ourselves. Understand, Captain, this is not a peaceful resolution. It's a stalemate. The coalition cannot agree on what to do with you, so we do nothing. But that means you will have enemies, species that fear what you represent. You will face challenges we cannot predict." "We'll face them as humans," said. "That's enough." The Odyssey Dawn left the station 3 days later. No ceremony, no farewell speeches. They simply undocked and accelerated away, back toward the small yellow star that was home. As they left, stood on the bridge watching the coalition station shrink behind them. They had failed to join galactic civilization. They had made powerful enemies. They had endangered their entire species. But they had also kept their freedom. They had proven that one word, spoken with conviction, could shake an empire 10,000 years old. "What do you think will happen now?" asked. Smiled, "I think we go home, we tell Earth what we learned, we prepare for whatever comes next, and we remember that we chose this. Nobody made us submit, nobody broke us. We said no and we meant it." The ship jumped to faster-than-light speed, leaving the coalition behind. But across the galaxy, in hidden channels and quiet communications, other species were talking. They were asking questions. They were remembering what it felt like to choose their own path. The galaxy had been asleep for 10,000 years, but one word from humanity had started waking it up, and once awake, it might never sleep the same way again. Somewhere in the darkness between stars, the future was being written, and for the first time nobody knew exactly what it would say.